So the first question is AI a trick or a treat? And we actually have, kind of a split of the 20. Okay, so 12 people said it was a trick, but 19 people said it was a treat. So have a, split there with more people thinking it's a treat, but there's a good balance, and hopefully we get into some of the discussion today that can help sway you one way or the other. And then have you used any generative AI tools for your personal health? Um, yes, so about eight people out of 25 said no. The remainder said yes, with ChatGPT being the one with the most responses, about half of the people who said yes, and the other ones like Claude and Gemini and something else being less frequently used. So thanks so much for taking part in the poll. And I think now we'll go ahead and get started. Great to see so many people in the webinar. So we're really excited for you all today, for us to share the work that we've been doing at the OpenNotes Lab and giving you an update today. To introduce myself, to kick things off, I'm going to be your MC today. My name is Chetan Sarabu. I wear a couple of different hats. I came to this work originally with my own journey as a pediatric patient with a chronic condition, which led me to become a pediatrician and trained in health informatics. I work at the OpenNotes Lab as an AI informatics strategist. I also work at Cornell as a pediatrician and director of clinical innovation. And to introduce the full lab team, and we'll go into more introductions as you hear from all of the folks here. Want to start off with Dr. Kate DeRoche. She is the director of OpenNotes and associate professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School, as well as being the PI, the principal investigator for the OpenNotes Lab. Amanda is the deputy director of the OpenNotes Lab. Liz is the communication and patient initiatives director for all of OpenNotes. Ria is our research coordinator, and Claudia is a research and administrative assistant. We also have a number of advisors for the OpenNotes Lab, who are nationally and internationally recognized experts from the field of patient advocacy, from healthcare leadership and technology expertise, as well as other areas of law and ethics experience as well. And the OpenNotes Lab is part of a broader OpenNotes team. We have Sigal Bell today, who's joined us as well, who you'll hear from. Sarah Stern is our amazing designer who's designed these beautiful slides for us. And Tom Delbanco and Jan Walker are the founders of OpenNotes. And with that, wanted to just go over some housekeeping before we get into the presentation today. We will be recording the whole webinar. You are all muted throughout the webinar, but feel free to post questions in the chat. And we are going to be leaving about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So feel free to continue to stay engaged in the chat. So the agenda for today, we are going to have Kate give us a brief history and overview of OpenNotes. Then going to turn things over to Amanda to share what's been going on at the lab specifically, and then zoom in further into a specific publication around a proof of concept study for patient use of OpenNotes with large language models that Liz led and is going to dive in. So, Kate is going to start off with that 30,000 foot of OpenNotes. Amanda's going to zoom us in closer to the work of the lab. And with Liz's presentation, you'll hear a very specific effort that we've worked on. And so with that, I want to turn things over to Dr. Kate DeRoche. Dr. Kate DeRoche is an associate professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School and is the director of OpenNotes and the principal investigator of the OpenNotes Lab. She brings a deep background in health services research, health policy, documentation, EHR innovation, driven by her early insight that patients and families' concerns often diverge from clinicians and policymakers, and the need to bring that all together. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kate.
All right. Thanks, Chethan. So this is going to be brief, and I'm happy to, if people have questions they want to throw in the chat or that we can talk, I'm happy to, provide more detail. But to get to really the meat of what we want to talk about today, I'm just going to give a quick overview of the work of our broader OpenNotes group. So the OpenNotes group has been a catalyst for change, working to be instrumental in the implementation of the 21st Century Cures Act, in which patients were granted access to all of the electronic information held about them in electronic medical records. We have worked on making care safer through promoting transparency and patient engagement, and you're going to hear directly from our patient safety star, Sigal Bell, who will tell you about a new project that she's working on. Our work historically has focused on using transparency to reduce documentation errors, improve medication adherence, and help close the loop on high-risk referrals. So we have over a decade of this sort of pioneering research and advocacy, and as the 21st Century Cures Act came into regulation, we started to think about what should we be doing next. And so that's where the idea of the lab grew. That's what the idea of the lab grew out of. And Amanda is going to talk more about that as we go. Next slide. Jathan, I'm not seeing the next slide.
I think it should be. Are you seeing this?
I'm seeing the first slide.
I do see
So
it, Jane.
I don't see it, which is oh, here we go. Okay, now no, now we're back. Go
Okay.
try again. Okay,
Yeah.
so I was about to mention that's too bad because this is a really sort of pretty slide with our timeline beginning in 2010 when the first study of sharing notes with patients began at 3 sites around the country, all the way through, you can see on this slide, this slide goes up to 2020, when we hit our goal of 50 million patients with access to their notes. Along the way, we began putting together OpenNotes learning collaboratives to help organizations, patients, and clinicians learn from each other. We branched out internationally, working specifically, we're doing quite a bit of work in Scandinavia. In 2019, our work, Sigal's work around our diagnosis and using notes to improve both safety and diagnostic safety really began. And then in 2020, we started to branch further away from just clinical notes into what other types of transparency can be helpful for patients and clinicians. And that includes piloting our notes, which is a note cogeneration method, and focusing on other types of information like discharge summaries. Next slide. Moving into the more recent past, in 2021, the 21st Century Cures rule went into effect. So all patients across the country had access to their clinical notes with some very limited, some really, really limited exceptions. In 2022, Liz really spearheaded what she has named our research, which is our work involving patients in not just in an advisory capacity, but actually in a co-design capacity. In 2023, we got into the education business, studying, designing and evaluating curriculum that's helping the next generation of clinicians learn how to use notes and transparency to connect with and empower patients. In 2024, we launched the lab, which Amanda is going to do a deep dive on. And in 2025, just so far, we've published 13 articles in academic journals. 4 additional publications are in press. So we continue to try to advance change with innovation, research, and evaluation. Next slide. I'm going to turn over to Sigal Bell now. So Sigal, as Chethan mentioned, is an associate professor at Harvard Medical School, and she is the director of patient safety initiatives here at OpenNotes. Sigal, over to you.
Thanks so much, Kate, and what a pleasure to join this dynamic group today. I'm just going to give you a tiny snapshot of one of the projects that we are just getting ready to launch. It's a project funded by the National Library of Medicine branch of the NIH, and it's called Health Coach. The project is based on the problem that we hear often, where although OpenNotes is now sort of the law of the land and federally mandated, there are still many patients who do not access or read their notes, especially patients from underserved populations. Patients who do read notes now use large language models, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, to understand their own health, as many of you responded to in our own poll. However, LLMs are not equitably accessible, and as a result, threaten to deepen the digital divide because those who may benefit most from such tools are less likely to be able to use them. In addition, we don't really know how to best use LLMs to help patients understand their health data, prepare for their care, especially again for those with limited digital or health literacy or limited English proficiency. And so this project is really aiming to address these problems. If you glance over to the right at the spiral diagram, I'll take you to the just left of center there where we see the prior note. And if you imagine that a patient has an upcoming visit, they now, with the help of Health Coach, can translate and simplify their prior note at the time of an upcoming visit to remind themselves what happened at that last visit. As a result, we know that patients gain actionable insights from accessing their health information, and with those insights can help plan for their next visit with a health coach guided visit preparation. That preparation would then ultimately flow into the EHR, become a pre-note for the provider to use, and after the visit would be part of that next note, and you can go around and around on that spiral, recognizing that with each turn, the patient is gaining more actionable insights, then helping to support and promote their own patient engagement in terms of their contributions to the record and to their care. So ultimately, the long-term vision is this virtuous amplifying cycle of patient engagement and learning. Next slide. In a very brief summary, Health Coach has 3 specific aims. The first is to conduct focus groups in English and Spanish at 3 sites. We have the BIDMC, our own hospital-based primary care clinic, Bowdoin Street Health Center, our community health center site, and UT Houston, which has several community health centers within the broader Houston community. And we'll be talking with those patients about their own experience with AI, if any, what are some of the motivators and barriers to using those kinds of systems to understand and contribute to their health. In specific aim 2, we'll be using those insights to develop a secure AI chatbot called Health Coach that will be tested by patients at our organization. And Health Coach will both, again, help patients access their former note, but also then use the tool that Kate mentioned briefly, our diagnosis or RDX, which we've found has helped to enhance diagnostic safety by allowing patients to co-produce their safety. So that will be embedded into an AI platform, encouraging and allowing for those contributions. Working with patient researchers like Liz, we'll develop a new method for rating AI-generated note quality from a patient perspective. And finally, in specific aim 3, we'll be putting this all to test with sort of a live patient focus group style protected environment in both English and Spanish for patients to use Health Coach and see what we can learn with respect to the feasibility and acceptability, patient engagement and learning, and the quality and safety of that AI-generated documentation in 2 languages. And we hope that that will ultimately lead to a broader implementation across the ecosystem and beyond here at BIDMC. And with that, I think I'm turning back to you, Chetan.
Yes, thank you so much, Sigal, for sharing that. And I wanted to share there was a comment in the chat from Ilana, Jacqueline, who said they love the idea of health coach. This is such a missing piece for so many patients. It's been very hard to direct older patients to feed their notes through ChatGPT. Just one quick question for you, Sigal, maybe, and then I'll turn it over to Amanda. There's a question from Deepak Rao who wanted to know what is the timeline for health coach?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Alana and Deepak, for the comments and interest. We're just getting started with this, just about ready to start recruiting our focus groups. We are developing health coach in parallel, just because of the timeline of the way AI studies move. So I anticipate we would have a health coach product ready in the next year, and we'll be testing it within that time frame. TBD. We're also thinking about some bells and whistles like voice recognition and things as such to help broader patient populations.
Yep. Thanks so much. I'm going to pass it over to Amanda. I know there's a couple more questions coming in about health coach, and we can sort of take a look and answer them in the chat. But
Do
want
that.
to keep the conversation going. So next, I'd love to turn things over to Amanda by first introducing her. So Amanda Norris is the Deputy Director of the OpenNotes Lab, where she focuses on fostering transparent patient-clinician communication and developing tools at the intersection of patient records, notes, and AI. She has a foundation in ethics, theology, strategic communications, and draws on her experience in higher education and healthcare nonprofits to amplify patient voices and support collaborative innovation. And so with that, going to turn it over to Amanda to share more of the work of our lab.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jathan. Um, I'm really excited to share our work at the lab with everybody today. It's a lot of information that we'll go through quickly, but hopefully we'll have time for that means we'll have time for the Q&A and we can talk about it more. But as Kate mentioned, we started the lab last year in February, and we had these core questions in mind. We really wanted to understand how health information technologies and developing health information technologies could be used directly by patients to improve their ability to engage in care. We know that AI is transforming interactions between clinicians and patients. We want to make sure that it's doing that in a way that builds trust and understanding. We also really want to support busy, overwhelmed clinicians through AI, but in service of patients without leaving them behind. And then we're really interested in the ways that AI is impacting equity. So these are some core concerns that we had. And with that, we developed 4 primary goals for the work of the lab. The first is that we want to develop or co-develop AI technologies through a patient lens. We also want to help to evaluate tools for patient centricity, guide implementation of those tools in healthcare settings, and then ultimately inform policy, legislation, and regulation around health AI. Next, yes. And we do that with a lot of different people and partners. So one of our primary partners, of course, is health systems, which is the case across all of OpenNotes. We have partners who academic research centers all the way to rural health clinics. And then for the lab, we also have industry-sponsored work. So that is new for OpenNotes and unique to the lab. And then we have learning collaboratives, which, as you saw in Kate's section, is not new for OpenNotes. We've had lots of learning collaboratives over the years, but we have 2 that are unique to the lab, and I'll talk more about those in a little bit. And then we have the Insight Panel, which is a really wonderful thing that we have at the lab, which is a group of patients and clinicians who participate in all of our work, and that's an extension of our research work that Kate mentioned that Liz really spearheaded. So we'll dig right into the Insight Panel. The OpenNotes Insight Panel is amazing. It's one of my favorite things that we have put together. We've always wanted to have patients at the center of what we do, and this was just a way of really formalizing that. So currently we have about 30 members across 15 states. 3/4 of them are patients and care partners, and 1/3 are active practicing clinicians. members of this group bring together a really robust range of lived experiences as patients and care partners, of people with serious health conditions, or they're active practicing clinicians who are really eager to collaborate with patients. So when we were putting this together, we were thinking about diversity in terms of race, age, gender, disability status, chronic illness experience, language, geography, educational background, and also healthcare experience. And so it's a really dynamic and interesting group that we get to partner with on all of our projects. Next slide. So I also wanted to touch on just how we evaluate partners and projects. When we launched the lab, we spent a lot of time thinking through this sort of decision rubric, in part because industry partnerships were new to us, and so we really wanted to think through doing that well. So I won't read all of these questions here, but just to give you a sense of the things that we try to take into consideration when we're developing partnerships and projects. We really think through alignment of values. We want to understand how equity is being operationalized by each project. Is transparency baked into the project, into the process? And how does it align with our existing projects and priorities? We also want to think through a patient-centered approach. How central are patients and care partners to the design and evaluation process? How does the end product benefit patients? Things like that. And then we think through team and organizational dynamics. My favorite question here is, do they pass the vibe check? So we want to think through, are we all excited about the product? Do we have academic freedom? Do we feel confident about the quality of the work that our partners are doing? And then finally, we think about product and impact. How accessible will the end product be? How broad is the potential for impact and things like that? And then, of course, underneath all of this, we have to consider financial stability about, is the project or partnership helping our long-term stability? And is everything that we think should be funded, that we think critical, is it funded? For example, dissemination. We do a lot of research, but it doesn't make an impact if nobody knows about it. So that's a really important thing that we always want to think through. Next slide. So I want to talk through our current projects, and they are grouped in this sort of framework of our overall goals here of develop, evaluate, guide, and inform. So the first group of projects is those that are where we're co-developing. And you can go to the next one. So this was our first industry-sponsored project that we did with a bridge. We're in the publication phase of that now. It was a really fun study to do. We partnered with our insight panel to really understand, what do patients want and need from an AI-generated patient visit summary. So we had a bunch of focus groups with them, and we're again, like in the publication part right now, which is really exciting, and extra exciting to me because we've also invited the Insight panel members to be authors, co-authors on that publication. Next slide. This is our trust project, or timely results for understanding scans and tests. This is underway right now. We're just at the beginning of this project. But the goal here is to, along with our partners at UC Health and Vanderbilt, to create a tool, an AI tool, that helps to summarize radiology results for oncology patients in a way that will reduce their scanxiety, and prevent misinformation from entering the space where they may have received a result on a Friday afternoon before they can speak with their doctor, that might be concerning. And so that's a difficult gap. And so we're working with this team to use AI to fill that gap. Next slide. So another partner of ours is HKS, which is a large health architecture firm. We don't have a fully developed project with them yet. We're in the early stages. We've identified a health system partner, and we're working out the details of that right now. But it's really exciting to work with them on, what does an AI integrated exam room look like? How are these new AI technologies shifting the physical space, and how clinicians and patients can interact with one another. This little triangle here, we realized when we were talking that a lot of our focus has always been trust and understanding between clinicians and patients. But now that AI, scribes, and other tools are in the room, there's almost like this third entity that needs to be a part of that trust and understanding. So that's a really exciting project we're looking forward to. Next. So this project was funded by the McGovern Foundation. This is, we call it as a shorthand, the evaluation project, where we're working with our insight panel to understand patient perspectives and priorities around how we should evaluate AI tools that are used in the course of their care. So we're actually also just now moving into the publication phase of that. And again, the Insight panel members have been invited to be co-authors on that paper. I'm really excited about that. So that's something to look forward to. There are tons of insights there, but we have created a conceptual framework for how to evaluate AI tools in healthcare from a patient-centered lens. Next. So this is another diagram of that. So you can see our little "we are here" dot. So we have a literature review paper that's also in the process of being being published. And then we're right at the end of this develop a conceptual framework. We've developed it, we're writing it up, and next will be the dissemination phase. So now I'll talk about our learning collaboratives. This is our AI translation learning collaborative. The purpose here really is to improve health equity through AI-powered translation tools. And we have an incredible group pulled together, about 40 members from around 20 organizations. This group includes CMIOs, clinicians, health researchers, and patients and care partners. And Naimisha Chilkuri here and Ryan Brewster are our co-leaders. Chethan and I lead that group with the two of them. Next slide. So as we initially had our first meetings, because we launched this learning collaborative a year ago in October, we really honed in on these sort of 5 core questions that the group thought are really important for us to address. One, what do patients themselves actually want from translation, AI in translation? How do we effectively measure or validate tools? Where does language translation matter most? What is the standard for what's good or what's good enough? And do we need a human in the loop? And what is that human's role? So these are some core questions. And as we developed a range of project ideas related to each of these, we sort of put them all, mapped them on an impact versus effort grid and narrowed it down to 2 projects that we actually defined. One is our project on patient perspectives, and now we have a subgroup that's working on that project. And the second is understanding the landscape of translation workflows as they are in turn, and not just with AI, but specifically focused on AI. And so we have those 2 projects defined and subgroups working on them, and we've applied for funding. So fingers crossed, that work will be exciting to pursue. And in the meantime, this collaborative, and as our nursing collaborative, which I'll talk about in a second, also functions as a way for all of these members to come together and share about the projects that they're already working on in their context, so we can learn from each other. So that's a really exciting group. Next. So we just launched our AI nursing. Oh, sorry, the title is wrong on this. This is actually not another translation learning collaborative. This is our AI nursing and patients learning collaborative, which we just kicked off. And so the goal here is to understand and improve patient experience and outcomes that are impacted by AI in nursing. So right now we have 16 members from about 13 organizations, and these are nurses with experiences across clinical care, informatics, and innovation, plus patients and care partners. And these are our co-leaders here, Suzanne Fink, Pat Focarelli, and Shelley Calder. It's a really energized and exciting group, but we're really just at the beginning of defining where are the areas of most impact and potentially developing a project with them. So next slide. And then this is the DIME implementation healthcare AI in healthcare playbook, which we didn't lead, but we were part of this 30 group of 30 leading partners across healthcare technology and policy to put this together. We can plop a link in the chat for this. I encourage you to check it out. I won't linger because I'm worried that I'm going too long. Next slide. And this is just our publications. So we have 4 publications in process right now. So one, AI and health literacy for patients, which I'm really excited to see come out. The patient preferences for AI patient visit summaries, that's our bridge project. And then the other 2 related to our evaluation project, which is the review of patient-centered evaluations of generative AI tools in healthcare, and then our conceptual framework for patient-centered evaluations of AI tools in healthcare. So we do have one actual official lab publication though, and that was led by Liz Salmi and Dana Lewis. And I'm excited for you guys to hear more about that, and I'll pass it back to Chaitan.
Thanks so much, Amanda, for really walking us through, and hopefully y'all get to see the breadth of projects we've been working on. And happy to share more about those. Feel free to ask questions. We can respond to them in the chat, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end. But to take that zoom in even further, really excited to turn things over to Liz to share the study that she led, a proof of concept study for patient use of OpenNotes with large language models. To tell you a little bit more about Liz, she is the Communications and Patient Initiatives Director of OpenNotes. She's been helping health systems and clinicians understand care through the patient's lens in an era of growing transparency. She's a 17-year veteran in patient engagement, living with a low-grade malignant brain tumor. She's an advocate researcher and non-traditional patient researcher who's really been advancing citizen patient science, human-centered design, and the future of driving care. And so we're really excited to turn things over to Liz to tell you more about her and this paper.
Thank you, Chaitan. And just so you know, I also won the Open Notes Award for most likely to open all of the notes, which I do every single time. And just to say, this paper, which I'm going to be talking about, was co-first authored with the amazing Dana Lewis. And also, Chaitan, please feel free to jump in and editorialize as I talk about this paper. So on that slide, just so you guys know, 17 years of, actually 18 years living with malignant brain tumor. And it wasn't until 8 years after my diagnosis that I saw my first doctor's note. And that experience of actually reading what the very words that my doctors write inspired me to reach out to the Open Notes team about 8.5 years ago. And, here we are, and I'm still working with Open Notes today. What's really the impetus for this research that I'm going to be talking about is it wasn't until the 21st Century Cures Act happened in 2021. At the same time, I also had my brain surgery 3 and 4, and I was able to, after those surgeries in 2021, 2022, I saw my notes immediately, my surgical reports, and ChatGPT came out around the same time. And so I would take those notes and run them through ChatGPT to kind of help myself understand them. And it blew my mind how I could simply use these tools to better understand my care. And it started to make me wonder, if I put my clinical notes through these AI tools, how accurate are the outputs of those notes? And I realized that I wasn't alone in wondering these things, and I wasn't the only patient or patient advocate who was thinking these things. And so actually, or last fall, about a year ago, Kaiser KFF Health published a poll about, regular people, not super patient advocates, but regular people were also using AI to better understand their health. And so the results of that said about 17% of people were using AI at the time to better understand their health. And actually that number increased to about 25% if those individuals were under the age of 30. And overall, people were just wondering, like, how accurate were these tools in interpreting their health information? So it seemed like, we're at a moment in time where people are using these tools, but weren't, kind of suspicious, like how great were they in interpreting. So moving on to the next slide, it was my own curiosity, our lab's curiosity, and actually just general public wondering, how good are AI tools in understanding our health. And so that led to us working on this publication, and it's a proof of concept. It is a case study of one with one data set. And on the next slide, I'm just going to go through quickly the overview of the study design. I'm running into time. So we used one clinical note. We did 11 different prompts, a variety of prompt variations, and then we were studying 3 AI models. There's ChatGPT 4.0 at the time, Claude Opus 3, and Gemini. And so I'm going to just quickly say something about the data set we used for this one note. It's one clinical note. It's not, everybody's notes. It's just one. And we were doing a deep dive, like how good are these models in interpreting information? And this is a screenshot. You don't need to see it all, but it is one note. And I want to say, why did we use this note? Why did I want to use this note? Well, it's my note, and I am able to take my health information and run it through whatever tools I want. So I had permission to use this one note. But also this is an important note because it documents a recurrence of my brain tumor back in 2021. And so this is a moment in time where if I'm seeing my note about a recurrence, that's probably a scary time. So we also wanted to use a scary note to understand and use the prompting strategies. So we go into this next slide, and it looks very complicated, but that shows our prompt design process. So for those of you who said you've used these AI tools or these large language models or LLMs, how you prompt and put the questions into these tools is really crucial in getting a good or accurate output. And so the prompts were first drafted by a patient advocate researcher, Dana Lewis, and then those draft prompts were shared with 2 lookalike patients, other people, not me, who are living with brain tumors, Rudy Frischman and Emily McIntosh. And so between the 3 of them, they designed what questions should be put into these AI tools. And we ultimately ended up with 11 different questions. And then this is how we prompted the LLMs. There's 4 different kind of ways of prompting. We called the first set is the standard, or basically we're just putting in the questions as the 3 of them created. Then there was a randomized prompting strategy of those questions, those 11 questions, but in random orders, not in the orders that they originally created. And then there was a persona series where we asked these models, well, rather than just answer the question straight out, answer them pretending as if they were an oncologist. And then the last thing is that same persona, but in a randomized order. And what you're going to see here is a custom scoring rubric we created. We use this to score the responses, where we modified the PDQI-9, which is a validated tool to assess the quality of clinical documentation. And then we scored across 8 different criteria based off of the PDQI-9, the accuracy, the relevancy of the response, how clear the responses were, are they complete, did they reference medical evidence, are they internally consistent? But then we added 2 additional parts to the PDQI-9 that are specific to large language models. How actionable were the responses? And then how was the empathy and tone? And then, yes.
And I'll just quick
Yes.
editorial addition as a moderator. I think just to call attention to the PDQI-9, this is the scoring mechanism that's being used in a lot of studies today. Specifically, you might have heard of a lot of different, we mentioned one scribe earlier. There's these AI scribes that clinicians are using to write the notes and to evaluate the output of the quality of notes from these scribes. The PDQI-9 is the scale that's being used across a lot of these domains to figure out how good it is. And so just wanted to add that in here. Liz and Dana and the research team built on top of that to add this additional patient lens. So yeah, turning it back to Liz.
Thank you. And that's important context. And so it's like so Dana and the team built like a whole protocol for this, but then people needed to rate to judge the responses. And so we had two raters who were blinded to the models that we were rating, and it was the author of the note, my neuro-oncologist, Jennifer Clark, and then the subject of the note, which was me. From there, it's like, well, you're wondering like, what were the results? Which model, worked the best? And so I want to orient you first to this heat map. The bottom row or the x-axis shows the different metrics from the modified PDQI-9. And then the information going up the y-axis shows you the three models being evaluated in the associated prompts. So drum roll, moving on. So which one did the best? And ChatGPT 4.0 with the persona, the clinician persona applied, actually rated the best. And it also did a decent job of, responding with the best medical evidence at the time. And then on the next slide, and we'll kind of go in a deep dive at the end here. If you were looking for something that's not just about the best medical evidence, but the tool that kind of gave a better empathetic and tone response, that would be Claude. And so across all models, though, the answers approved when we prompted it as pretend you are a helpful doctor. So I want to get to the end, the results, but before I do, I want to thank everybody who worked on this. These are all the co-authors. I couldn't have done this without Dana Lewis. And I just, thank also Amanda Norris, who provided a lot of support along the way. Okay, so here's like the big takeaways. Make sure we have time. Yay. So the big takeaways are what matters here. If you are a patient advocate or a clinician or researchers who's like, I want to replicate a study like this, that moment in time, those responses, we know AI tools are changing all the time, and maybe some of the things that were created don't exist anymore. But what really matters is that source data, the note that we use to reference throughout. That source data matters, the note, and how you write a question, a prompt. That is really a crucial skill that patients need to start using if we want to use these tools. What model, the best model at the time, in this case was ChatGPT 3.0, but or 4.0, but now there new models are coming out, so those models matter. And then for best results, if you're going to use tools to ask and prompt questions about your clinical notes, apply a clinician persona instruction. Pretend you are a neuro-oncologist, pretend you are a cardiologist, and now answer these questions. So that is it. If you scan that QR code, you get access to the paper, and it's open access. All right, handing it to the team.
All right. Thanks so much, Liz, for walking us through that specific paper, really getting into the details of the type of work that we're pushing. So hopefully this gives all of you listening a better sense of the type of work that we're doing at the OpenNotes Lab and OpenNotes broadly to really advance where to really bring this patient-centered innovation lens to the future of health, particularly in this time of rapid change with AI. And excited to open it up to Q&A. And wanted to mention from some of the questions we've seen, if you're a patient advocate, care partner, and you're interested in being more involved, such as through the Insight panel, please reach out to us. If you are a researcher, academic partner, health system, and you're interested in collaborating, please be in touch. If you're a funder, that's interested in funding more research in this work, we'd love to hear from you as well. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and open it up to the whole panel for Q&A. So feel free to enter any questions that you have into the chat.
No one has any questions. We were just so thorough.
So someone, Stephen asked, whom do I contact for collaboration?
Me. Happy to receive any and all emails for collaboration. And I will put
Yes, Ilana, Amanda's going to put her email in the chat. Oh, she just did it.
There's a question from, I'm sorry, that question was from Stephen Charlap. There's a question from Katie Coleman. Do you have any frameworks on how you're approaching patient privacy when uploading results?
I can
Yeah, go ahead.
talk a little bit about that. So for Liz's study, it was Liz's note, and she spoke with the note author, and they both agreed that they would upload it to chat to these various models. So for when a patient does it, they sort of are the bearer of whatever whatever risks there are involved in uploading your information. When we are working on studies, for example, the trust project that Amanda spoke about, we have to draft a plan to protect patient privacy, and that goes to our IRB. So the IRB either says, yes, this is great, or no, you need to do more. And then for that particular study, all of the work is happening within the firewall of UC Health. So the reports that we'll be using to try to generate these patient-friendly summaries, first they'll be de-identified, patients' names and medical record numbers will be removed. Then they will be fed into various LLMs that are behind the University of Colorado Health firewall. So they are HIPAA compliant, and their information is not shared outside of the organization in which they're getting care.
And I think the other piece, it's a really good question, depending on the context. If you're an individual patient who is using a commercially available LLM tool, I think there are some best practices, you could take where you're trying to limit when you're, putting your information in, depending on how you're doing it. If you're taking a screenshot, if you try to avoid maybe putting your name or other personally identifying information. Sometimes it's tricky because it's also within the body of the text. There's different steps that you might take, but I don't think we're at a place where there's like an overall framework on how to do that best. There's a question from Jan that kind of follows up on that as well, where I'd have to do a little bit more research on it, but the question from Jan is, even as a patient, I might want the AI to use my data to answer the question, but to exclude it from feeding the model with my data. It's a really important point, Jan, where I'm not personally aware, but there might be some AI tools that allow you to say, I want to use this, but opt out of my data going into your training model. I don't know if anyone else in the panel has any kind of additional insight around that.
There are paid versions of LLMs where you can where you can tell it not to use your data in its training models, but typically the freely available, web-based models are going to use your data.
There's a question from Judith for Segal about Health Coach. Judith was wondering, Segal, you wrote the data be behind a firewall. She was wondering if you could provide more details about where the patient's data would reside. I think this is something that would be my understanding, but curious to hear you're doing this from within the health system.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And so it would be BIDMC's firewall when we get to that point. I was curious, actually, getting back to the question about patient data. I'm curious if patients would feel differently about their data being used for training if it were, broadly available commercial models versus institutional specific models. I don't know if anyone out there kind of has opinions or wants to respond, but it would be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, it's a good question. Don't have uh much to add at the moment, but it sparked a lot of thinking around this. So thank you for raising those issues. There's a question from Brittany. Do you have more insight on how phrasing your question to the chatbot affects its answer? Would love to hear more, especially on any differences between how patients ask questions and how doctors ask questions, and if that changes the answers you get. And maybe I'll point this question to Liz first, since your paper explored this, particularly from the patient side. We'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. Specifically in the paper, and, folks can read the paper and get, explore, do they agree with our responses to it? But just putting those basic questions that the patients first asked, without any persona, we got a different type of result that was just more generic and plain language. But then when we said, now pretend you are an expert neuro-oncologist or an expert oncologist, the way the results were outputted, they were definitely more detailed and actually added more empathy. It was like, pretend you were also a doctor. There was empathy as well as more accuracy. And so now switching brains from, hey, I was a researcher, I was part of this project, to me as a patient. Actually, when I query, my notes now, outside of the study, I then do add personas, and I add personas for a lot of different things where I feel like I'm getting a better result. So that's like just my lived experience with that. But I know that in other studies that didn't involve real patients to design the questions. So we've been looking at a lot of like AI studies coming out of like NEJM AI, where they're like, uh, you know, write questions as pretending you are a patient. The way clinicians and researchers write questions and prompts is vastly different than real patients, because we patients use different language. We don't say pretend you are a 25F with type 1 diabetes. It's like, I don't say I'm a 25F or a 46F. I say I am a 46-year-old woman living with a brain cancer. I don't use that language in that way. And so we end up with different types of results as a result. And Chetan, I wasn't sure if anyone else in the team had any responses to that.
I wanted to just say that that's the whole reason why we did that was the whole impetus for the paper was, well, we don't think that these prompts are written the way patients would write them. So I think the special sauce of this paper that Liz and Dana led is that the prompts were both written and they were kind of produced with patients. So they sound more like they sound like how a patient might interact with the LLM.
Yeah, I think it's such a critical thing. There's a number of studies out there, as highlighted, that are often clinicians asking questions and how they think patients would ask questions. So it's really important to go to actual patients asking these questions. I know we're just at a minute left. I know there's a couple other comments and thoughtful answers that we'll take a look through. I know a number of folks have shared examples of other products and solutions that we'll take notes on those and take a look at those. Just wanted to maybe turn it over to the team, to either Kate or Amanda, or Liz, if anyone wanted to share any final words.
I think
I
oh, go ahead, Kate.
I was going to just say thank you to everyone for joining us today.
Yeah.
And please do reach out, if you're interested in learning more about the Insight Panel, if you'd like to partner on a project, or you just have thoughts that we didn't get to that you'd like to discuss, feel free to just reach out.
Yeah. Seconded.
Same.
Excellent. Well, really great to have all of you here, and we'll stay engaged with all of you. So thank you for all that you do, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.